Hello, and I guess I should be now be able to talk to you guys on Flutter. What I'm going to start off with is explaining you with the help of a very simple example that we're going to do today is a stopwatch timer app. So I'm going to start with a very small presentation. Yeah, and here we are onto our creating mobile app using Flutter. So Flutter is a tech stack which got launched close to around 2017, guys, wherein you got like Android and iOS apps which have been probably been under development since 2006 or 2007. So it was close to around 11, 12 years later on, Google decided to introduce a new complete technology stack, Flutter. And the beauty of this technology stack got adapted very quickly into the advanced, or you can say, industry, wherein you can see that most of the companies that now are creating their mobile app from scratch want to do it in Flutter. It's not like there are no other technology stack which exists, but the ease of learning Flutter or the ease of deployment which this framework gives was very, very useful. And it's backed by Google. So companies kind of trust that the entire development team has been Google. So probably it's going to be a useful product for their companies. So now let's identify how do we use this. And in today's session, I'm going to talk about how we will be using our single code to create an app on Android and on our browser. So the same app without a line of change of code, I'm going to show to you how you can make on these two platforms. It's not like we cannot use it on iOS. The thing is, right now I'm using my Windows system. So if you have a Mac, equally you can deploy the app on Android, iOS, and web. So here's my expertise. So I've got a 10 years industry experience into mobile app development, and most of my app are into fintech, basically finance. So I have apps which are like crossed 40,000 downloads and have like monthly usage of close to around 25,000. So yes, not big, very statistics, and I'm talking about all the app like which are live in Play Store and App Store. So the thing is, I'm talking about what kind of concurrency my apps have got. So there can be so many users, there can be so many devices, and yet how do you create this Flutter app working seamlessly on any kind of a device? Let's talk about the features. If you would notice, the number one I put it as cost effectiveness. When it comes to Flutter, the cost effectiveness comes in with the development team, with the cost of development, the app, the design, the prototyping, the testing, and the deployment. All single cost effectiveness. So let's imagine the software development cycle with the help of a diagram, guys. So imagine that when we have our app over here, there's a prototyping phase. Now, prototyping is wherein we get the designs of the app, then we do development. Now, this development can be into different stages. Like one is where it is you have given it to testing, that some features are already into testing, some features are live, your users are using it, Next, some features your dev team is working on it, and followed by over here your deployment. Now, imagine this cycle being repeated for every app environment. That's your Android. So, this entire cycle that you would notice. Now, let's say you have an app, an Android app basically. So, your entire cycle gets duplicated onto Android, and seeing this entire cycle gets duplicated onto iOS. So let's say there is a blue color button for a screen, and the same entire screen with the blue color button, you code it on both environments. So this all things, all steps get duplicated with twice the efforts. And in the end, the result is same. So why don't you go into a technology stack which can help you create one kind of an app that you can deploy on these two environments and which work equally well. So presumably herein comes the Flutter, which saves cost as the development team has to be one, knowing just the Flutter technology. Then the deployment team again is going to be like deploying it to Play Store and App Store simultaneously, like no gaps in the deployment, and all this thing could be done by reducing the efforts. So no duplication of efforts. Your single Dart code, that is your single Flutter app, can be converted into multiple sources. And finally, you can reach out to your Play Store and App Store users in at the same duration without hampering your company's policies. Like, these are all the benefits that you could be having when it comes to Flutter. Now, let me just take some questions. Yeah, okay. So till this point, I think I have no questions, and I'll be again presenting my screen. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to run down to Android Studio and not just do the talking, but also do the coding part of it. So here I am creating a new Flutter project over here. Now, this is under an assumption that you have your Flutter installation being done, because that is one particular thing that I will be expecting you if you are actually trying to understand Flutter. If not, at later on point in time, I'm going to show to you how do you get the right tools that you can be doing for getting your app development to be done. I'm going to click on next. Over here, I'll give the name of the project as Programming Hub, and over here programming.hub. Now, did you notice these checkboxes? So over here I'll take Android, I'll take iOS, and I'll take web. And in fact, I'll push this project onto GitHub so that after we are done with our live session, you can use this project as a base and create your own app. I'm going to click on create, and it says, oh, there exists already a project in this name, and I'll put this as Programming Hub YouTube and click on create. Well, it's creating the Flutter project. Meanwhile, this thing is in progress. Let's go and understand in much more details what do you mean by cross-platform development. When it comes to Flutter, the close competitor of Flutter, or you can say an equivalent technology which exists exactly like Flutter, is React Native. So let me highlight the differences between them, guys. And I'll write down in a typical distinction format, wherein In the left side, I'll highlight the points about Flutter, and on the right side, I'm going to see the points for React Native. Now, let's say you are a guy who has a good grip upon object-oriented programming. So let's say you have a good amount of knowledge, let's say on either of Java or .NET or C++. So basically, I'm just framing examples of object-oriented programming languages. Okay. So when it comes to Flutter, it also uses an object-oriented programming language. But the name of the language is Dart. D-A-R-T. Dart. So Dart is one of a framework or a programming language, you can see. Wait, let me just increase the size so that you guys can see it very clearly. Yeah. So this is my Flutter, wherein it uses Dart programming, and when it comes to React Native, it again uses your JavaScript. So you will be having your JavaScript base that will be helping you to create app. When it comes to Flutter, if I were to highlight on which all platforms you could be deploying, it could be Android, iOS, web, Linux, Mac OS, Windows. Do you think is there any more front end that this entire world has seen? So probably these are the most common front ends that you would be using in your day-to-day life. Let's say how you use Microsoft Office. Yes, you can create an app as complex of that into Flutter. Let's say if you want to create something like numbers or something like Mac OS app, you can do it with Flutter. Next, if I were to write it down for React Native, it would be this: Android and iOS. Well, what surely lags over here is the web, the Mac OS, and all the other support which Flutter comes and which React Native does not. Hence, when you see the adoption, Flutter got a huge response and now has even a bigger community than React Native. Next, over here, I can list down one more benefit as native apps. Now, you might talk about React Native. Yes, it also creates native apps. So there is no difference. So what is this entire native app? So let me talk about how you being a school kid and you were about to understand computers. So what did you know about computers is this device understands zeros and ones. So basically, this is the machine language, and that's how we relate it to, right? A computer understands a machine language, and that's what we have been told ever since we were kid. So that's how native apps compile. So as I show you my code now, which has got created over here, and if I would click on this run button, in few moments, you will be getting an .apk file to get installed in my phone. What is a .apk, guys? It's the Android package installer which gets created because I'm running my app on my Android phone. Had it been into Windows, then .exe file would have been getting created. So let me write it down rather than seeing. When it is Android, it creates APK. Similarly, had it been a Mac, it would have created .dmg file. Had it been your Windows, it would have created a .exe file. So, do you need like do you see the beauty over here, wherein you get an exact output which one particular operating system would understand, and Flutter exactly compiles the code into that technology. That being said, like Flutter converts your code into machine language that suits to that particular machine. For example, for Android, it will create APK. So it suits to the Android operating system. For Windows, it creates an exe that suits to the Windows operating system. So in this way, you get this benefit of native applications on each platform which is there here, which surely is missing in case of React Native. But yes, even they are doing this thing better. But the only disadvantage on React Native is over here all front end get covered, but in React Native only Android and iOS get covered. Let me stop over here again. Check over if you have any kind of an questions to ask to me. Yeah, so it's going to be not Android app development, Neil, and it's going to be like Flutter app development, which you can use on any kind of an app. So you have to learn Flutter. So over here, I'll just put you have to learn Dart programming and Flutter framework. Okay, and next, let me just share my screen again. Yeah. So we were discussing about the APK file, and I would want your attention to be on this word Gradle. So now we have known cross-platform development. So cross-platform is one single code deployed to multiple environments. Let's talk about our introduction to Flutter. So like you see, the entire distinction between them, over here, there are several advantages that it carries. Now, we are going to create a stopwatch timer app. So how does the app look like? Now, being a developer, I highly recommend that before you start jumping to the code, you create a diagram of it, what you're going to do as a code, and then you do the further steps. So I'm going to now show to you how my timer app is going to look like. So just imagine that this is one container that will show up the hours in same way. I would be having another one for minutes, and the last one is going to be for the seconds. Okay, now we're going to create a wireframe of our app. The wireframe would closely resemble like what we're going to create, but I want this design to be there at the back of your mind. So when you see me doing the code, you shouldn't be going haywire of what we are going to create, and this entire design sticks to your mind, and what we are going to get as an output is going to be in and around this design. Okay, so after we have these three blocks, which define what is going to be the hours, what is going to be the minutes and seconds, there is going to be a button that's going to kick off this timer. So I'll put over here start timer. And this button, as you tap, is going to kick off the timer. So you'll notice less than the time that we are going to see. Okay, so now while exercising upon this reader task, see what are the advantages of this reader. So when it comes to native app development and cross-platform development, what are the implications and when you should be having your native app to be developed and when you should be choosing Flutter. So what do you mean by native? Let's see. So let's see now. Yeah. So that's where you see the .apk to get created. Now, like I was saying, we're going to run it on our Android device. I'll quickly just open my Explorer and I'll show you over here my phone, my device. Yeah, so I just went down to unlocking my phone and I'll share my screen again. Yeah. So that's our app, which is like the default app which we have created, which we have got created after we run our Flutter. Now, let me just do this as a slideshow. Yeah. So we were onto this slide, guys, wherein we were able to, we were trying to understand how does a native app development got its differences against cross-platform development. So imagine you're trying to create an app which is like Google Maps, which uses your GPS every time. Or let's say you're trying to create an app like Snapchat, which uses your camera, applies filters, and does all of that. And it uses your camera like hardware, like anything. You will be having all kind of filters. You'll be having all kind of image manipulations that would be done. So what I'm talking about is a app that is very much dependent on a hardware. Then probably you should be having your app to get created on native. So what do you mean by native? An app dedicated only for Android. For example, Google Maps, or an app dedicated only for iOS. Let's say iCloud. In that case, your app should be native. However, if you want to create an app which is like an e-learning platform, like Programming Hub, or an e-commerce app, in that case, I'll include Flipkart, I'll include Amazon. So they are not doing anything as such with the hardware, and they're just trying to get the API connections from your phone, and that should solve your problem with Flutter, as you'll be having one single code base to create multiple apps. So that's where you should be going. Like if your app is not relying very much on hardwares, you go for Flutter. If your app relies a lot of things dependent on hardware, then you go for native. Now, talking about Gradle, and this is where the magic happens. Gradle. So Gradle is the entire build ecosystem, guys. Let's say when you talk about Java. So Java is JVM, which basically is the Java virtual machine, which helps you in installation of the Java and making it run on any kind of an operating system, be it Mac, be it Windows. The Java works perfectly fine everywhere. So Gradle is that build system exactly like JVM, which works practically everywhere. So you'll be having over here Mac OS, Android OS, iOS, everywhere. Gradle just takes care of everything that you will be noticing into your app development. So you'll also notice this Gradle to kick in. See, running Gradle task, and after that you got an APK. Had it been a scenario you had been running this app on Windows or be it on Chrome, then you would have got a JS file at the output. Now, I have done enough talking, and let's try doing the code. I'm going to erase every piece of code that came by default, and my app now I'm going to build this stopwatch from the very scratch. So let's say we have a class, my app, that would be extending something called as a stateless widget. Now, if you are unaware of Flutter terminologies, that is perfectly okay, because you're probably running down to the session to understand Flutter for the first time. Stay along, and I'm going to make sure what are these technical terms that is strictly according to Flutter. I'm going to explain to you in another 15-20 minutes. For now, let's see how does this my app look. So I'll put over here a return material app, and there is something called as a home attribute, in which I'll put a text, welcome to Flutter. Now I'll close this function and I'll call this my app. So look over here. Do you notice main? And you probably would have seen this main function in any kind of C or C++ or Java or C sharp. Every kind of a program has got a main function which defines the main entry point to the code. And that exactly is my Flutter, wherein we have this main function which defines the entry point to my Flutter app. So how does this Flutter app now look? It's going to look terrible, guys, and presently looks like this. A red color big text font which says welcome to Flutter with dark yellow underlines. Looks terrible? Let it be. In today's session, I don't want you guys to be user experience people or having good creative skills to deploy a very creative app. We are on the basics. We're going to learn these things from scratch, but we're going to make it even better by adhering to good programming principles. So let's see, the first programming principle, which again is a common sense, is creating a code according to directories. So over here, what I'll do is I'm going to create a directory and I'll call it as timer. Next, I'm not going to dump everything in a single file, this main.dart, and I'm going to segregate it into different files. So I'll right click over here and create a new dart file and I'll call it timer stream. So what is this timer stream? Let's go to the design, guys. This entirely is going to be the timer stream, but this is going to be the end product. So before this, before this, I'll be having my starting point of the app, in which I will explain you Flutter terminologies like scaffold. So let me just spawn this rectangle so that it uses my entire screen width. See, here we are. This is the topmost pixel of my phone, and same way I would put this as the bottommost pixel of my phone. So this entire yellow rectangle that you see in Flutter, we'll call it as scaffold. So I'll put a class timer stream extends a stateless widget, and then over here you notice I got something as a build. Again, stay down there and I'll be able to explain to you what does this build do. So here is my scaffold. Now what I'll do is put this welcome to Flutter text onto the center of my screen. So look over here, I'll put over here my body. At the center of the screen, I'll put a text, welcome to Flutter. And then from the main screen, I'm going to call this timer screen. Let's see how does this thing look like. Now when I do a run, and I'll show you my app. So check this thing out. From the topmost to bottommost pixel, now you have a white color background app, and at the center of the screen, it shows welcome to Flutter. Let's dig into the code. Like I said, this is the main function. From the main function, we call something called as a my app. So in my app, what are we doing? We just have put this material app, which is the background, and this timer screen, which at the center of the screen shows this welcome to Flutter. If you're wondering what is the stateless widget, all of that, what is this build function, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to help you understand this. So first, let's understand what's a widget. A widget is something that you see at the output. So for now, you notice there is a text, and that's exactly what is a widget. So the screen has now one simple text. So let's say if I would put over here something called as a column, and I'll put over here from everyone at Programming Hub. Now, if I do a hot reload, a column will put these text boxes one below the another, and that's where you have it. But wait, how did it go at the topmost part of the screen? Now, let me get you the concept of column and row into Flutter. So, let's see if there are any questions you guys have for me. And I'll scan through the chat box. Yeah, okay. So now over here we were trying to understand what is a column. So guys, when it comes to column, it will put the widgets one below the another, kind of this, but we expected the things to go to the center. For example, this way at the center. However, it came to the top. Now I'm going to teach to you relating to our school concepts that a y-axis represents a column, which basically means one below the another. On y-axis we will be putting the widgets, and that is over here, and the column has got an attribute called as main axis alignment, which can help you make it go to the center. Now if I do a hot reload, guys, you'll notice this comes to the center. So look, at the y-axis I want these two widgets to go to the center, and that's how easy the code syntax is. So what I'm going to do, guys, is over here put 0 0 and hours. What is 0 0 and hours? This is considering our first container, because do you see these three containers, they're equal in design. So if I'm able to complete the design for one of them, then I will be able to do it for the others also. So here I have put 0 0 and hours. Now if I do a hot reload, you get to see this, and now I need this rounded box around my 0 0 hours. So I'll put over here something called as a container. So what is a container? I can put a decoration and I can put a color. So let me just put color as deep orange. And if I now do a hot reload, guys, you notice that we have a container, but that actually is using my entire phone height. Okay, so I'll go to the column and make it shrink in size. So I have one more attribute, main axis size dot minimum. Did you notice? Now the container is shrunk to size is because on y-axis I told it become or make it to the minimum possible size. So it squeezed it to the minimum possible size. So what are we now interested into? Creating this rounded box and having a bit amount of spacing between them. Let's say over here we add padding. So the padding parameter will now show you this box. Did you notice? Now there is 20 pixel spacing on each sides, and I can even add a rounding. So we will have this 20 pixels rounding at every corners, and it looks something of this sort. Next, What I'll do is, to improve the visibility, I'm going to change the text color to white. If I now do a hot reload, guys, it changes to white, and I think I should increase the font size. So by default, the font size is 14. Let me keep it as 26, and my font weight to be bold. If I now do a hot reload, yeah, so this is much more better visible than the previous, and I'll copy the same style onto my R's. Let me keep the font size as 18 and regular font weight. Yeah, this kind of looks good. So what we are done creating with one container, and this is the entire design that we wanted to have. So let's talk about how do we create these two. So one obvious way would be to find out that these three are adjacent to each other. But before I start with this, let me see if you have any queries to ask to me till this point of how did we create a container. Yeah. So now what I'll do is I'll again share my screen. Yeah. Go to my design. Yeah. Now, do you notice these three these three boxes? They're adjacent to each other, guys. So what I'm going to do is over here I'm going to add row. So if column can put things one below the another, a row should be putting things one adjacent to another. So I'll put a row, one container, second container, and third container. So if I now do a hot reload, did you guys notice I have three containers? If I change the second one to minutes and the third one to seconds. Then I have three containers, and that resembles my design. If you're wondering, there is no spacing in between them. Now, if y or if column denotes the y-axis, a row denotes x-axis, so I'll put something called as space evenly, and it will evenly space out the containers. Was it very easy, guys? We created three containers, and we have this over here with three distinct values. But what if there is multiple or same widget which we can reuse again and again? So now let me introduce to you on a concept called as common widgets. So what is common widgets, guys? Imagine that you're trying to create an app, and or be it any professional app. You notice that the design for the app is same forever. Let's say if the button is blue color, the background is orange color, and the text sizes, they all remain same. So how does those apps get created? Now let me show to you the concept of common widgets. So we have one container and we want to duplicate it, or we want to have the exact same lookalike on over here, minutes and seconds. So we'll go to the timer and we will create a new file as timer container. This is a separate file which I'm starting off as a stateless widget, and over here I'm returning my container. So let's see. If I now call this thrice, I get to see 3 hours widget. If I just make it multiple times, that many times I will be able to spot my hours widget. But the point is, did you notice the smart work which we have done? We wrote the container once and we are reusing it again and again. That's the beauty of common widgets. Now, look over here, 1, 2, 3, and I do a hot reload. I get 3 containers. Now, the only thing is, as per the design, it has to be in minutes and seconds, and it shows all hours. Hence, let's go from the basics of programming. We know if I have a constructor variable, let's say timer label, and I'll put this in a constructor. So I'll say over here required, and instead of hard coding this hours, I'll put timer label. So you'll notice if I pass a parameter hours, minutes, and seconds. If I now do a hot reload, guys, did you notice? With the help of one variable, we are able to create this uniqueness and we are able to stick to the design. How did we achieve it? With the help of our constructor variable, which now has removed the hard coding for my timer label. In same way, can we do it for this 00? The answer is yes. So I'll put a string timer value. In same way, how we have declared this constructor, I'm going to create timer value variable and replace this 00. Now let's try over here 01 hours, 24 minutes, 46 seconds. If I now do a hot reload, are we able to see those changes? Yes, we are. So what we are what we are trying to do is introduction of common widgets and variables that can help you create your app very quickly. That's exactly how professional apps get created. You have to identify the things that are going to remain same throughout the app and then create them as common components that you can use it within the screens. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share, check on to the questions asked to me, and I'll check if there is anything that comes along. Yeah, yes, it will be available. Perfect. So for now, I'll share my screen again and go over my app. Okay. What I want you to understand is the start timer button. Do you notice this 3 rows followed by this button is one below the another? So I'll put a column. Again, what is column, guys? Putting the things one below the another. On the center, I would want, and I'll put a button. So The button says start timer. So I'll put over here the text on the button, start timer. Now if I do a hot reload, I get to see this. You're wondering 01 24 46, are they going to get remained there? The answer is no, as because I'm going to replace it with variables. So I'll put integer variables as display seconds, display minutes, and display hours. And I'm going to remove the hard coding from my row widget to show up something of this sort. Now if I do a hot reload, guys, you'll notice everyone turns to 0, as because all the integer variables have been initialized to 0. Now we have finally reached to a point in the design where we can click on this button and this widget starts to tick in and my timer app actually works. So what I'll do, remember at the beginning I was saying you to stay along and I'll explain you what is the stateless widget. So let's see how does the stateless widget now gets converted into a dynamic widget. So until now, our app is fairly simple. It has got nothing to be changing. So this my app triggers this timer screen which shows up like this. The button is stagnant, that is, it's not changing the value. The containers, they're not changing the value. Even the seconds tab and all the things are just static. Now, coming to this point, what we understand is if I take something as a stateless widget, guys, it's going to be static. Then what is the dynamic widget into Flutter called as? So here we are converting our timer stream to something called as a stateful widget. First, see the output and then try to understand what we have put into our code. So I'm converting it to something as a state class. And over here, what we're going to do, create a seconds passed variable. And the objective of this variable is to increase the seconds and display it on the UI. So for moment, only for testing, guys, I have added the seconds passed variable and I did something plus plus. Let's see if I now do a hot reload, whether we were able to successfully add over here a dynamic component or whether we were not. So let me put a return over here as timer screen state and then do a hot reload. So when I click on this, do you notice my seconds timer is increasing, and if I click on it multiple times, it refreshes the UI multiple times. So are we going to create a stopwatch app by clicking on the timer again and again? The answer is no. The only point which I'm emphasizing over here is how a stateful widget made your entire screen to be dynamic. Until now, we had all static component and the time has come where we move to the dynamic elements into our app. So here we are keeping one variable, doing a set state. So what is set state? Let me comment this part, do a hot reload. So right now I have pressed on this button start timer 10 times. Let me click on it 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What did you notice? This did not go up. If I now keep the set state on, did you notice? It shows up as 15. And if I click on this again and again, it increases the value. So the thing which I want to highlight here is set state is actually recomposing my build function, and it's updating this value to show up on the UI. If you don't do set state, you're not going to get the updated UI. I hope this makes fair sense to you guys, as because when it comes to Flutter development, you have to use the set state very carefully in order to do your app development. Yeah. Now, I'm going to go over here and write a function for calculating time. So let's say we have 154 seconds. So basically it's 3 minutes, it's 2 minutes and 34 seconds. So I'll put a bit amount of calculation here, which I'm going to explain to you shortly. Yeah. So what I've done, I've hard coded the seconds first. Now, what I want to show to you is if I want to calculate minutes, I'm going to divide this variable by 60. And then if I want to get the seconds, I would take a modulus of it. Let's see if this thing work or not. So I'll do a run and click on this, and over here I'll call my function calculate time. Okay, now it says 2 minutes and 154 seconds. That's because over here I forgot to change this variable name. Yeah, let me just run it once again, guys. Yeah, and now it shows perfectly. 154 seconds is 2 minutes and 34 seconds. So how does this breakage happen? Now, let's understand this line number 49. So, school level mathematics again. So if I take this number 154, try to divide this thing by 60. So I will be having quotient as 2 and the remainder to be 34. Now this is an scenario wherein we are not going to consider decimals. So this is my remainder 34 and this is my quotient, which is 2. That's exactly the calculation which we have done here. So when you do percentage, it's called as modulus. So what modulus does is it takes 154 and finds out the remainder after dividing by 60. So you get this 34, which I show up on the last widget, that is over here in seconds, and then in 2 minutes I'll divide by this 154 by 60, and upon rounding I get this 2. So this tilde symbol does the rounding for me. Now I'll divide it by 3600 in order to get hours. Yeah, so this is how you'll be having our entire calculation to be done. So what do we do now is not hard code this 154, and rather do this every second. So like all these integers, there is a timer class in Flutter. So what will happen? I'm going to create a periodic timer, and this periodic timer is going to call my calculate time function one time in 1 minute. So let's see how does this thing work. I'm going to run my app. It shows all 0 zeros. I'm going to click on this, and this time guys, I'm not even cheating, and I'm not going to click on this button again and again. So what do you notice is we have a timer app that's actually ticking in, and we have a calculate time function which is able to show on the UI. So let it go past 60 seconds so I can also show to you the minutes. So over here, meanwhile, we'll add a button, and this button is going to stop the timer. I'm going to go about one more round of explaining you the calculation and the code so that you guys can understand this small beautiful app in a very good way. Yeah, so that's my stop timer button. I'm going to do a hot reload. You get one more button, and what do you guys notice? Did the timer tick in, and you were able to successfully see the minutes also to roll over. Yeah, so now what we have completed onto is this part where we have our timer to be working. So next, how do we do the stop? So if you notice this question mark, now why do we use this question mark? So when it comes to Flutter, these are all the four variables. But did you notice they all have equal to symbols? This timer is not having that, which basically means the timer is initialized only when I'm clicking on this button. So what I'll do is over here, when I declare the timer, I made it as a question mark, which basically indicates that my timer is null, and then I'll give it a value later on when you click on the button. So if I were to implement stop timer, I'll just do cancel. So now this is my app. If I click on stop, the timer stops. If I click on start, the timer starts. Again, if I click on stop, it stops. Start keeps the timer moving. Now, in the very end, I'm going to keep a Boolean variable. Is timer active? So this will prevent any kind of re-triggering of the timer. Yeah. So now if I would run the app from the very beginning, if I click on this button once, or even if I click on it multiple times, the timer is ticking, and it just keeps on moving by 1 second every time. If I click on stop, it stops. If I click on start again, it starts moving the timer. So that's a very small app that we created from scratch on Flutter. Let's complete our PPT. So we stopped over here and I showed you the actual magic of Gradle, wherein how you saw an entire app to get developed from the very scratch on timer. But did I tell you that the same app I can do it on Chrome as well? So let me show it to you how. Now without changing a line of code, what I'm going to do is on the terminal window, I'm going to do flutter run -d Chrome, and you'll notice the exact same stopwatch app to work equally well on my Chrome. Let the compilation get happened, and my Dart compiler is going to convert it into a JS code or a JavaScript code. After a few seconds, I'm going to show it to you. Now, we have our Programming Hub flagship course on Udemy, which will help you become a successful Flutter developer. All the things that we'll be having over our course is actually very industry related, and you can check out on the comment box and on the description box our course Udemy link, wherein you'll be able to get all the modules, all the things at like according to the latest Flutter terminologies. Yeah, so that's our app on Chrome. If I click on start, you notice the app to work as good as you are able to see it on my phone. So without a line of change, I was able to deploy it on two different platforms. So this is the entire syllabus that we'll be having for our Flutter app. It starts with basics, has got hardwares like cameras, maps, Google Maps, and offline creating of apps. Then it has got state management, which is like most important concept of Flutter, and how do you do routing. Then we create a e-commerce based app, and finally we go into our Firebase, wherein we discuss about all the Firebase services.